Okay, welcome on everyone. It's Thursday, Thanksgiving, and a lot of Thanksgiving themes in the Parsha, but that was earlier this week. We'll do a Rashi today for Thursday. I'll actually do two short Rashis today for Thursday from the fifth Aliyah. So Yaakov is preparing to take his family and to go back to the land of Canaan, as we discussed yesterday a little bit. And his decision to go back was post the birth of Yosef. After the birth of Yosef, Yaakov feels prepared to go back to the land of Canaan and take on his brother Esav, as we saw yesterday, based on the pasuk in Ovadia, as Rashi cites. But there's one more impediment to going back, and that is not who he was going to, which is Esav, but who he was leaving, which is Lavan, trying to convince Lavan that he was able to go, and that's part of the interaction that happens here in the fifth Aliyah. But before that, Hashem commands Yaakov to go back, which then becomes very clear to him that that's what he has to do. Vayomer Hashem el Yaakov, shuv el eretz avotecha u'moladatecha ve'yeh imach. Go back, he says, to your land, the land of your forefathers, the land of your birthplace, ve'yeh imach, and I will be with you. Now, on the surface, the ve'yeh imach seems to me to be just a reassuring promise to Yaakov that if you're afraid of going on this journey, if you're afraid still of confronting Esav, which is yet to come, or you're afraid of this new change in your life, or you're afraid of leaving here, no matter what, I will be with you. Ve'yeh imach. And that's, if you remember, back to the beginning of the Parsha, when Yaakov leaves the land of Canaan, he makes this whole deal with Hashem. He says, if you will be with me, and if I come back, I'll build a mizbeach, aser asrenu lach, in the first Aliyah. And so the language of Ve'yeh imach is very much reminiscent of the deal they made originally, and sounds here like Hashem is giving him reassurance. Yeah, go back, Ve'yeh imach, I'll be with you, I will protect you in some kind of physical manner. Rashi adds another layer to the meaning of Ve'yeh imach. He says, Shuv al aretz avosecha v'sham eyeh imach. He interjects this word v'sham as if it's placed in the pasuk. It's not just saying go back and I'll be with you, but go back in order that I should be with you there. Shuv el eretz avosecha v'sham, go back because only there eyeh imach, I will be able to be with you. Why? Aval be'odcha mechubar l'tameh ifshi lahashro shchinasi alecha. Because so long as you're here in the midst of this impure environment with impure people, I will not be able to rest my Shekhinah upon you. So we believe, of course, that Kadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere. We believe that Kadosh Baruch Hu was able to protect Yaakov wherever he was. The Eyeh imach, in the simple sense that I mentioned before, was part of the deal that he made with him, and he was going to be with him, whether he was in Lavan's house or Eretz Canaan, or wherever he was. We saw maybe the protection changes. We saw, right, the Malachei Eretz Yisrael leave him, new Malachim of Chutz La'aretz join him, maybe a different level of protection, different kind of protection, but God is with him everywhere. But Rashi says Ve'eyeh imach has a deeper sense, not just that he'll be there to protect him in the larger sense that God is everywhere in the world, but God will be intimately there with him. He will rest his Shekhinah upon him, whatever that means. We don't know exactly how to define that, but a greater presence of Hashem in the life of Yaakov. So we know that the Avos, the Imaos, they were Merkabel HaShekhinah. They were the chariots of the Shekhinah. They carried the Shekhinah upon them in the world. But what Rashi is revealing to us here in the Pasuk, through what Hashem says to Yaakov, is that this whole time in Lavan's house, he didn't have that presence of the Shekhinah upon him. God was there in the larger sense, but not in that intimate sense. And so Hashem says to him, through some kind of prophetic means, which shows you they have some connection at this time, he says, go back, because there's a greater connection we're going to have, a greater intimacy we're going to have. My Shekhinah will rest upon you. And so there was kind of a threefold reason for the return to Canaan. Number one, to get away from Lavan and all of the life that he had there, which he didn't really want. Number two, to go back to his birthplace, which he only left because Esav was threatening him. And now number three, because there he would get a different kind of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It would be qualitatively different than the one he had in Lavan's house, and that's something that was very important to Yaakov. One more quick Rashi. The next move that he makes is a very smart one that every husband should know, that before making the move, he goes to ask his wife, or in this case, his wives, plural. So he says, Vayishlach Yaakov vayikra Rachel Leah sadeh el tzono. He goes and calls them, and he tells them, you know what, your father's not treating us like he used to. It's time for us to leave, time for us to go back. Rashi points out the order here is interesting. Vayikra Rachel u'Leah. He calls first to Rachel and then to Leah, even though Leah was his first wife, Rachel was his second wife. Leah is the older of the sisters, Rachel is the younger of the sisters. There are many reasons why Yaakov could have called to Leah first and Rachel second. But he says, Vayikal Rachel tchila, he called Rachel first, va'achar kach leLeah, shehi haita ikar habayis, shebishvila nizdaveg Yaakov im Lavan. At first, when I read this Rashi, I thought, okay, maybe he's calling to Rachel first because she's the Akeres Habayis. She's the essential wife. She's the wife he really loved, the wife he really wanted, the mainstay of the home. But then when I read it again, I think he's saying something different, which is not quite as insulting to Leah, and it fits more in terms of the context of these psukim. She's the Ikar Habayis, Shebishvila Nistaveg Yaakov im Lavan. She's the reason why they're there. She's the reason why Yaakov stayed. She's the reason why Yaakov becomes so entrenched and intertwined in the life of Lavan. And so now, when they're going to extricate themselves from that, it makes sense that the first person he would turn to is Rachel, because it's because of her that he got into this mess to begin with. He agrees to work for her for 7 years, to marry her, and then it's another 7 years because he first married Leah, etc., etc. All of what transpires is really because of her. So she's the linchpin of this equation. It's not that he leaves out Leah. Leah is also important to him, but that he goes to Rachel first because she's kind of the impetus of this whole story. And therefore, if they're going to reverse the story and now extricate themselves from this environment, she had to be consulted first. And that's how Rashi explains it. I think that's how I understand this Rashi, and perhaps sheds a little bit more light. And instead of kind of the insulting-ish tone that it has to Leah, the more practical tone that perhaps Rashi gives it, at least in my interpretation. Hope you have a wonderful day and a great Thanksgiving, and looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Take
Have
care.
a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
Be well,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.